So when I reflect on a past successful unit of teaching and kind of what that looks like, typically it's or when that has occurred in my experience, it's been when I'm engaged, when students are engaged, when kind of there's a certain level of energy in the class, everyone's involved, and in those times, I'm in the zone, or I feel like I'm in the zone. I'm kind of firing on all cylinders. I'm using all the tools in my toolbox as a relatively new instructor, and so um, unconsciously, I reflecting on it, unconsciously, I realized that I'm using basically all the learning theories in different combinations at different times. Part of that is my personality. I think as a generalist, I'm not very dogmatic, so I'm always looking for different ideas, different approaches. There's always different ways of doing things, and so I was encouraged to read and Teaching in a Digital Age by Tony Bates that there is no one single best or most effective teaching learning theory. And I think that's a reflection or recognition that that students learn in different ways. And I've noticed that myself. Some students will enjoy a large lecture session. Some students prefer hands-on practical. Some uh, prefer a large reading assignment. Some prefer videos. Some prefer more self-directed self-study or worksheets. Um, and when I'm in that zone, when I'm in that flow, I'm kind of I'm I'm engaged in that level of recognizing students in kind of a non-dogmatic way, non-singular approach. Everyone learns differently, and so I'm approaching my class and students in that sense, and I try to provide course content to reflect that as well, the different learning, different ways that students learn. Um, so I'm an instructor at ECIT, Aircraft Maintenance Engineer Program. And so some of the different learning theories that I have used in different ways in aircraft maintenance there are some elements that are very objectivist. Physics of flight. There's just, um, it's not how we feel or interpret the physics of flight. It just is. So some elements have a very objectivist approach. As an aircraft maintenance engineer, there are morals and ethics and attitudes involved. We have legal responsibilities, safety, government regulations. We have moral responsibilities of trust and workmanship, quality, preventative maintenance. So these are kind of behaviorist elements that I try to impart on my students and use in terms of learning teaching theories in class. Um, a lot of the content that we teach is layered and scaffolded. So we learn about X and we learn about Y, and then I try to in a class setting to get them thinking about, okay, well, you know about X, you know about Y. What happens when we put them together? What do you think is going on there? What are those going to what are the relationships there? So in terms of challenge questions and encouraging discussion in the classroom, kind of getting that cognitivist element into my classroom. Um, and then I put a lot of effort into or a lot of thought into helping my students understand the why. Why are we doing this? Why do we learn this? And it takes form in a couple different ways. Sometimes I'm kind of a little bit more spoon feeding them the why this is important because um, X, Y, Z. And then other times I might relate a story or a personal experience in hopes that they will use that or make them think about um, uh, finding their own kind of why or making their own connections. So kind of like a constructivist approach. So using all kinds of different learning theories and teaching theories in my classroom. Um, in terms of kind of how I might change my future teaching, having been through this assignment now, I think I tend to be kind of a little bit more siloed in my approaches. I might use behaviorist approach for this one subject, more cognitivist for this other subject, but I think there's room for to be a little bit more fluid, a little bit more blended in my approach, not always kind of quite so um, kind of zoned into one avenue, even though I'm using multiple learning approaches, learning theories throughout the course. There's room to kind of blend them, I think, a little bit more seamlessly. And then I was also really intrigued reading Teaching in a Digital Age by Tony Bates, that um, there can be different learning approaches depending on where students are in the course or the program early on versus later when they're more knowledgeable, they're more experienced students. And so, for instance, um, earlier on might have a more objectivist approach, later on might have more cognitivist and constructivist approach. And just recognizing that is has been helpful to understand that um, for myself to use in future teaching.